Welcome back, and this is Everyday Life. My name is Walter Mwesije, and today on Everyday Life we will be looking at unsafe abortion. And with me in studio is Dennis Juko. He is the programs officer for CEHURD, and they're basically saying, you know, Uganda should be one of those countries that also have safe abortions if they are to happen, because what we know is the reality is abortions do happen in this country, and medical, practitioners do carry out abortions, though there isn't a law that supports them that much. But in most instances, we see that abortion would really, be fitting for some positions where it is deemed important. Just a brief look at this. We still constitute, the sub-Saharan Africa. About 29,000 deaths annually occur from abortions, and 6.4 million cases of abortion are reported in Africa, and these were carried out in 2013, and only 3% were safe. Dennis Juko, my first question is to understand if you really are advocating for abortions.
Not really. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And thanks a lot for inviting us today and hosting us at NTV in the morning. To begin with, we are organizing the second national conference on unsafe abortion under the theme taking stock of progress, opportunities, challenges, and whose responsibility. Now, this is a follow-up conference on the first national conference that happened in 2012. There were several resolutions that were made in the communique that was produced out of that conference. And we are convening this in partnership with other organizations that are actually interested in the work of sexual and reproductive health and rights in the country. And we are looking at how far have we progressed in implementing the resolutions that we have made. Then, maybe if I can read them aloud for everybody to understand who is watching. In the first national conference on unsafe abortion, which happened in 2012, as I've just alluded to, they called for urgent implementation of the national guidelines to reduce maternal mortality and morbidity due to unsafe abortion. Now, these were tabled by the Ministry of Health, so meaning that we work in partnership with the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry also recognizes this as a public health issue, which we cannot actually continue hiding our heads under the sun. So, the second resolution was increasing government and donor partner investments in pre-service and in-service health worker training, commodities and equipment, and increase the personnel to provide access to legal abortion-related health services. Then it had the third resolution, which was looking at empowering communities, empowering grassroots communities at greater risk of death. Because in all the surveys that have been done, the people that cannot access safe services, safe abortion services, are the ones that suffer most. Why? Because they cannot access, partly because they cannot afford, but also the legal and policy framework is very restrictive in Uganda. However, this doesn't stop them from committing abortions. What we have to understand from the onset is when someone makes a decision to terminate a pregnancy, some of them we've engaged a lot of obstetricians and gynecologists who always experience these cases on a daily basis. And what they say is, they come seeking for help for safe abortions. They want to access safe abortions. But what happens is they first cancel them. Now, those who are cancelled on the alternatives, that you can keep a pregnancy and then a child can be adopted at a later date. And they also cancel them and they inform them on the likely outcomes when an abortion is done. which are mainly negative when they are done clandestinely using unsafe means. But you know, some, of course, however, the bigger percentage doesn't. You know, they insist on terminating the pregnancy for several other reasons.
I think that's one of the most important things that we should put clear here, that at whose point of view or on whose point of view should we, you know, be advocating for a safe abortion? Is it on recommendation of a medical practitioner, or are we saying that if a woman cannot keep a pregnancy, then she should go and have an abortion, a safe abortion? But still, the question would remain, you know, why then did you get this pregnancy if you really wanted to, you know, go in for an abortion?
Okay. In the first place, for who? That's the question you've asked. As I've just indicated it, that, you know, some are counsel, they are given information on alternative ways, but they insist on carrying out an abortion. Now, that would imply that if you can't access safe abortion services, you will go clandestinely, which are always unsafe, and they come with several effects, several complications that are very difficult to handle. Now, when I mention complications, I would also want to highlight that the government spends about 7.5 billion Uganda shillings annually treating complications as a result of unsafe abortion, which money could otherwise be allocated to something else.
I know the most common one is fistula, you know, amongst the many.
But fistula is not actually mainly as a result of unsafe abortion, but of course, it's part of the equation.
Yeah.
You know, now what happens is, going back to the question you've asked, for who should this happen? As I've mentioned to you, that there are those that insist on committing abortions. What are the reasons why they would like to commit an abortion? You know, some of the reasons are very outrageous. You know, there are reasons like incest, and so they can't afford to live with a stigma in society for living or for giving birth to children as a result of sexual intercourse with relatives. And, you know, parenting. I think society has not done enough to emphasize the issue, because these cases come out of society all the time, that when you sleep with a relative, that's incest, and the likely outcomes would be a pregnancy that may not be wanted. Incest. That's one thing. Now, when someone thinks about the outcomes of that, keeping that pregnancy and giving birth to it, and the stigma that will come along with it, because for as long as you still live, and for as long as this child still lives, you're going to live with that stigma. Now, some people are afraid of that stigma. Secondly, there is an issue of rape. You know, many people wouldn't want to live with children or to give birth to children that are as a result of rape, because of course it also keeps the stigma. You keep,
it's traumatizing.
It's traumatizing, yeah. You know. Now they can't afford to live with the trauma for long. Now what happens is they also made that choice of committing an abortion, and so if safe abortion services are not available at them, they'll go clandestinely. You know, they push wires just to kill the fetus. They do lots of things, that they crash even razor blades, and they drink as a result because they want to kill the fetus inside.
Have you done surveys on this, and you found out, you know, such incidents?
Exactly. The Guttmacher Institute, you know, launched a report at the beginning of this year. That was on the 8th of March. The Guttmacher Institute did a study on the incidence of induced abortion in the country.
How bad is the situation in this country?
You know, the East African average, if I can begin to from the East African level, you know, the East African average is 39 out of 1,000 women who commit abortions, yeah, who induce abortions. However, Uganda is far higher than the East African average, which is 54. Now, that gap from 39, which is the East African average, and then to 54, you know, it's very alarming, and we think that it must be a concerted effort to find a solution to this. And that's why we are reconvening the second national conference.
And I was just going to say, you know, one of, or probably three of your objectives for this national conference now is to take stock of the achievements made towards reducing unsafe abortion in Uganda since 2012, to examine the underlying challenges towards addressing unsafe abortions in Uganda, and the roles, responsibilities, and accountability mechanisms of key sectors in reducing maternal mortality and morbidity due to unsafe abortions.
Yes.
Yeah. How are you, you know, how are you going to make all these evaluations? And probably what are you setting up for the next now, of course, moving forward, because this is the second conference, you'll probably come up with new objectives, and maybe you'll, you know, have seen where you hit the challenges or where you're still lagging. What's the way forward?
Well, based on the assessment that we shall do at the national conference, assessing the progress, because it has been 5 years down the road since 2012, and we are reconvening another. We want to see the commitments that people made. How far have they gone with implementing them? Because clarifying the legal and policy framework on abortion is critical to ensuring that we solve the puzzle. Now, to begin with, we need commitments from the different stakeholders, because the ambiguity of the legal and policy framework, you know, the legal and policy framework is creating, is very restrictive. It doesn't address some of the things, some of the factors that are pushing people to commit abortions.
And just like
so now here, clarifying the legal and policy framework, because this was left, by the way, for the Parliament, and the Parliament has not done this, because the Odoki Commission that did researches when they were making the 1995 Constitution, in society they found this topic very controversial, and they found two divergent views from the conservatives that are saying no, abortion shouldn't be allowed in the country, but also liberalists who are saying that okay, it's a controversial topic, but there are conditions under which people can access safe abortion. Because if we've not been able to curtail or to prevent unwanted pregnancies, of course we can cancel people to live with the pregnancies and they give birth, and then telling them about the information of the alternatives available. However, if we fail at that, then people are going to continue dying, because, you know, unsafe abortion is among actually the highest contributor to maternal mortality in the country. It contributes 26%. Now, that's an alarming figure that we cannot continue hiding our heads under the sand. It is something that we have to find solutions to if we are to hit, or if we are to perform outrageously well on reducing maternal mortality in the country, because 26% is a very big figure.
If we go back to the books of laws that govern this country, which is the Constitution, here I see the law only permits termination only to save the life of a pregnant woman. And, you know, there are also conflicting and restrictive interpretations of the abortion provisions under the Constitution, the Penal Code Act, and the National Reproductive Health Policies.
Yes.
Isn't this the point where we need to engage our legislators, you know, to have these inclusions probably reinterpreted and maybe remodeled to match the changing world?
Exactly, because from the onset, I think I needed to mention this. The law we're operating with is a Penal Code Act of the 1950s, by the way, that was borrowed from Britain. And we are still using it. Now, how many years down the road? From the 1950s, 50 plus years. Britain today is no longer using the same. because it has been able to recognize that society is dynamic. It moves always. It is always in a transition, and many issues come into play. And so for them, they are no longer using that penal code that we borrowed from them. However, Uganda is still having it just like it was implemented. It was being implemented in the 1950s. Now, I mentioned the Odoki Commission that made the 1995 Constitution. Divergent views. Even when you go into the parliamentary Hansards, you know, it is clear how the discussion was, you know, divergent views. And they left it to the parliament to make a law clarifying on abortion in the country. Now, Parliament has not yet fulfilled its duty. They have left Article 22(2) of the Constitution just there, non-progressive, because they have the mandate of making a clear law on this. Now, for us, we are not pushing them actually to legalize abortion, because even as our position, we are not saying that, you know, someone should wake up one day and they say, I want an abortion, and they have it. No. However, we are clear and cognizant of issues that may surround or push people to seek for an abortion, as I just clarified for them for you.
Yeah.
Now, what happens is, if we do not do something on the legal and policy framework in the country, these are still bound to happen. One, they were the national standards and policy guidelines to reduce maternal mortality and morbidity due to unsafe abortion that we are staying. You know, these we are providing guidance, you know, to those who may seek an abortion and to those who are the service providers. Under what conditions would you provide for? Now, they were stayed, meaning that there is no guiding principle whatsoever guiding provision of services. It leaves all stakeholders in a quagmire because they don't have a working document to guide them. Secondly, there was comprehensive sexuality education, you know, that was banned by the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. Now, what happens? They banned comprehensive sexuality education anywhere on the Ugandan soil. Now, what happens is, for us when we are growing up, we had access to some materials, like straight talk, young talk, that would guide us on how to live responsibly. Don't engage in sex without reaching an appropriate age. And right. You know, they were tailoring information based on age, on the age. And this is the information that guided us. As we speak today, we don't have any guidelines that should actually allow access to information by young people. Yet, the recently launched the 2016 Uganda Demographic and Health Survey indicated that on average, Ugandans start engaging in sexual intercourse at the age of 15.
All right, Juko, I will have to interfere from there, but I'll just let you, you know, take your last shot in less than a minute. You know, tell us what we should expect from the conference. From the conference, actually, we expect commitment from the different stakeholders on ensuring that we solve the terrain that is so ambiguous. That's why we actually invited different stakeholders, just to get their feel of what the situation is, also to share with us what they think that would be appropriate for us to move forward on solving the issue of unsafe abortion in the country. Thank you very much for joining us. That is Dennis Juko. He is the programs officer at CEHURD. And, you know, that really winds up today's Morning at NTV. Farida Nakaziwe will be taking you further with Masud Mtia. Have a good morning.